Conor, you're British, and I guess that means that you drink your tea with jam and bread, as the song goes. Isn't that right?
I do. I drink tea with jam and bread, and you're a Yank, which means you do jam and peanut butter.
I do, with no regrets. I love it. I think it's delicious. But we're talking about jam today because it is a pretty important part of our lives around the world.
If you say so.
Jam is important in a lot of contexts, and it's been important in scientific discoveries.
And that's going to be what matters in this episode
of Discovery Matters, brought to you by the Life Sciences team at GE Healthcare. I'm Dodi Axelsson.
And I'm Conor McKechnie. So, jam.
Yeah, jam. Today, we're going to be telling a story about looking for one thing and finding another, and about the importance of keeping an open mind and how it can lead to game-changing consequences. We're going to be talking about a remarkable way to separate proteins and change the way medicines are made. 6 decades ago, a product called Sephadex was born, and it changed everything. It's still out there today, stronger than ever, using basically the same recipe since its birth.
So where exactly does the story start?
From the very beginning, as they say. So to help us tell the story, I sat down with Jan-Christer Janson, a Swedish guy who was a professor and is now professor emeritus at Uppsala University.
The Sephadex story starts with 2 Nobel Prize winners. Svedberg got the Nobel Prize in 1926 and Arne Tiselius got the Nobel Prize in 1948. I would say they laid the foundation to the methodological research that was to pursue for decades at Uppsala University. But when it comes to Sephadex, a very important circumstance is the Second World War. During the Second World War, many Swedish companies turned to Swedish universities for help to develop new products. For example, Svedberg was asked to produce synthetic rubber, neoprene. At that time it was necessary for tires, airplane tires and other tires. Similarly, the Swedish sugar company in Arlöv in Skåne, they turned to Tiselius and asked if he could help them to find some useful substance in beetroot use, sugar beetroot use.
Sockerbolaget, or the Swedish sugar company, had a theory that sugar beets might have pectin in them.
Pectin is a polysaccharide that give a gel for jams, etc.
So in 1941, Arne Tiselius asked one of his students, called Björn Ingelman, to look into whether beetroots contained pectin.
But he couldn't find any pectin of any value. But he found another polysaccharide, dextran.
So this is one of those beautiful mistakes that science can serve up, like Alexander Fleming and his discovery of penicillin, or the angina drug that became Viagra.
Exactly. And when it comes to the story of Sephadex, these beautiful mistakes, as you call them, pop up a lot. Back to dextran.
Dextran is formed when sugar is attacked by a bacterium called Leuconostoc mesenteroides. During the warm summertime, these bacteria, they grow in the beetroot juice. So when they arrived to Uppsala and Ingelman started to work them, he only found dextran. He told the sugar company, sorry, I cannot find any pectin, but I have found dextran. And then the engineers at the sugar company said, aha, dextran. What Ingelman did was to contact a friend of his, Anders Grönvall. So Ingelman and Anders Grönvall, they started to make dextran, purified dextran, and then they injected the dextran into rabbits. Why? Because in the early 1940s, a professor in Gothenburg called Örjan Ochterlony had developed immunodiffusion technology. Immunodiffusion means that you can have precipitation lines between antigen and antibody. So Anders Grönvall and Björn Ingelman realized that if we can create antibodies to dextran, then we can easily, using this immunodiffusion technology, which was new at the time, then we can find out which batch contains dextran and which does not. So, in order to produce antibodies, they injected dextran into rabbits. They got no antibodies.
But this setback didn't deter Grönvall and Ingelman. In fact, this just spurred them on even more.
These two people were clever enough to realize, you have a substance that can be injected into an animal without raising antibodies. It must be useful for medical purposes. So they contacted a very small company in Stockholm called Pharmacia.
So now I see where the name Sephadex comes from. Separation, pharmacia, and dextran.
Yep, that's right.
And fortunately, the president of Pharmacia was clever enough to realize, here we have the possibility to get a modern drug. This is our opportunity to get into modern medicine. So they signed an agreement with Grönvall and Ingelman to start to develop dextran, and they contacted the sugar company. The sugar company started a daughter company called Sorgona to produce dextran on a huge scale. 1946, Pharmacia had a product on the market. Can you imagine? They had a pharmaceutical product on the market only 5 years later. It's amazing.
So, in the middle of World War II, back in Sweden, dextran has become a plasma substitute in battlefield medicine.
Yeah.
And the guys who've discovered its use in this way have just kind of stumbled upon it.
That's right.
But that doesn't bring us to Sephadex yet, though.
Not yet.
Okay.
Right. Because Ingelman was still stuck on the idea of finding pectin somewhere. And this is where jam and bread comes in.
At the Department of Physical Chemistry, Ingelman kept in his mind the problem of pectin to create a gel for jam, thickener for jams. Swedish people like lingonberry jam, as you know. And this is why pectin is very important for the jam industry. So Ingelman had not forgotten that problem. When huge quantities of dextran came to his disposal, he tried to make gel of dextran for making jam. And he made some very nice gels, and he contacted the sugar company and asked, here, I can make a gel with dextran. What do you say? Are you interested? No, they were not interested. Then Ingelman was clever enough not to apply a patent, not to publish that he could make a gel from dextran and epichlorohydrin crosslinker, because he was clever enough to realize this must be a product. Sooner or later, this must have an application, medical or whatever. So he kept silent. Fortunately, he kept silent. But Ingelman became research director, and he started to recruit. And he recruited Jerker Porat and Per Flodin. So they spent several years in the early 50s to develop this technique of column zone electrophoresis. And they tried many different packing materials, none of which was very good.
So Per Flodin joins Pharmacia, and he becomes the head of the dextran laboratory. But he was stumped. And then his boss and our friend Engelmann mentioned that he'd actually made cross-linked dextran years before.
So Flodin realized, cross-linked dextran, totally non-charged, no adsorption effect, perfect for packing into column zone electrophoresis column. So Flodin started to make cross-linked dextran and grind it into particles and gave to Porat for testing for column zone electrophoresis. And then comes the question, was it any electricity or not? There was a separation occurring where small molecules come out after large molecules. This is what Porat found out in a zone electrophoresis column packed with cross-linked dextran particles. And then Porat said to Flodin that this is exactly the same result as we obtain with the starch gel. Both Flodin and Porat realized that now we have a product.
So they pitched their product to Pharmacia, and they were given the green light through a written memo. So that's the story of how Sephadex came to be. It was the first tool of chromatography used to purify protein, and it was the tool that enables scientists to learn more about proteins, what they look like, and how they can be used in biopharmaceuticals and for treatments.
So that's history. What about the state of Sephadex today?
For that, I want you to think about another image, probably your favorite weekend activity. You know how you load up the washing machine?
You separate socks and trousers in one, and then you separate them by color, and then maybe you separate them by different fabrics. And so we have all these tools that separate them for you. And then we also have tools called affinity chromatography that would separate your particular favorite blouse with that color, with that design, and sort of only that one that will pick it up. I'm Lotta Ljungqvist. I'm the CEO of GE in the Nordic region. Sephadex has been part of my life, and also a little bit more modern sibling of Sephadex, the protein A-based resins. I did my PhD at the Royal Institute of Technology on using protein A molecules for various affinity chromatography. That's where I started my scientific journey.
And Lotta told me that though Sephadex is steeped in history, 60 years worth of it, it's not bound to it.
It's not only the ones that started to use this product 60 years ago. People are also using it now for the first time, and using it in developing new manufacturing processes for new medicines. If you look upon how many drugs that are used today, several hundreds of these that are based on proteins. They still use the same type of toolbox, Sephadex and Sephadex new siblings. Then that's sort of fascinating to see what impact that tool has made on the global health.
So we've seen where Sephadex came from and where it is now, but I can't help wondering if it's got another 60 years in it. What about the future?
My name is Henrik Ihre, and I'm the director of something called Custom Consumables. So we're essentially making customized chromatography resins, pre-packed columns, and I've been here for almost 20 years now.
At this point, I was thinking that maybe the future of Sephadex would be one of change, like a new cell phone. There's always something new and better on the way. So maybe the future of Sephadex means a new and improved product.
New and improved could be very good for new processes. Otherwise, you want things to be like they've always been.
Okay, so if not new, improved, then what exactly is the future of Sephadex?
I think the Sephadexes, especially the Sephadexes that people use for existing processes, they will be the same. And I think that's exactly what our customers are asking for us. No changes. So what we need to do now, we need to listen. I think the expression is we need to put our ears to the rails and listen to what our customers are saying to understand what products that we need to develop for the next generation.
Listening, for sure, it is important. And as Jan-Christer tells us, the story of Sephadex is not at all over. In fact, this idea of finding things where you weren't looking for them has attached itself to the story of Sephadex now and its family of products.
I am proud of having followed, to follow the development of the company and the products. It's amazing that Sephadex G25 is growing every year. If you have a good product, you can always rely on, if it's well spread over the world, many different brains come in contact with the product, new applications come up all the time. That's the funny thing with the material. And I think Sephadex G25 is a wonderful example of such a product. There is a man, he's dead now, Ulf Rothman in Malmö. He happened to drop some Sephadex G25 in a sink and saw that it sucked up the water in the bottom of the sink. And then he realized, oh my God, that G25 could probably be used as a wound healer to suck up all the exudates from a wound. And a product was created called dextran, which is Sephadex G25.
That's all for this week on Discovery Matters. Next time, how a Chinese hamster changed medicine forever.
Thanks for listening, and rate us on your podcast app. Bye. Our executive producer is Andrea Killen. Discovery Matters is produced in collaboration with Soundtelling. Production and music by Thomas Henley.